right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling Tinex and their approach to sustainability.
Sounds good.
Our listener wants to create a presentation about it, and they've given us a ton of material. Internal documents, training materials, even a company presentation.
Wow, that's quite a collection.
Yeah. And just a first glance tells me Tinex isn't messing around. They seem to have really integrated sustainability into their business.
Yeah, and it's not just about doing good, it's strategic too. They link sustainability with their long-term business goals.
Exactly. I say they have three main focus areas: sustainable supply chains, sustainable operations, and sustainable customer offers. But before we jump into those, let's start with their overall vision.
Makes sense.
Because it seems to be more than just about being green.
Oh, absolutely. Tinex wants to be a leader in their markets, not just in size, but in ethical and sustainable practices too. And this ties back to their core values, making things happen, being far-sighted, and being good to work with.
Okay, so they want to be the go-to supplier because of their sustainability efforts, not in spite of them.
That's interesting.
Now let's get into the details. Starting with the sustainable supply chain, I'm seeing a lot about a supplier code of conduct.
Right, that's key. Basically, it lays out Tinex's expectations for its suppliers. Everything from human rights and labor practices to environmental responsibility and ethical business conduct. You can actually find it on the Axel Johnson International website.
Axel Johnson International.
Yeah, that's the larger group that Tinex is part of.
Got it. So no shady practices or turning a blind eye just to save a buck.
Nope. They're serious about holding their suppliers accountable. And it goes beyond audits and paperwork. They even have a sourcing office in China to work directly with suppliers.
Oh, wow. So they're really hands-on. That's impressive.
And this leads into another important aspect, Scope 3 emissions.
Scope 3, those are the emissions from a company's value chain, right?
Right. Exactly. Often from their suppliers. Think of it like this. Tinex can control what happens within their own operations, but their footprint is much larger when you factor in those emissions from their suppliers.
Right. So they're taking responsibility for the whole picture.
Exactly. Tinex is pushing their suppliers to measure and reduce their Scope 3 emissions by 2030. They're also encouraging more circular practices, like using recycled materials, designing for recyclability, and even exploring take-back loops.
Take-back loops, what are those exactly?
Imagine a system where customers can return old products and Tinex refurbishes or recycles them.
So closing the loop, basically.
Yep. Minimizing waste, keeping materials in use.
That's a great concrete example.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the supply chain piece. Let's move on to their sustainable operations, what they're doing in-house.
Right, sounds good. So this is where we see how Tinex is going above and beyond. They're not just being sustainable themselves, they're helping their customers be more sustainable too.
You mentioned they have some pretty interesting customer offerings.
Right, one is called FAG R&R.
FAG R&R, what is that all about?
Well, it stands for Repair and Reconditioning of Rolling Bearings.
Ah, okay, so instead of buying brand new bearings, customers can have their old ones fixed up.
Exactly. Tinex can recondition them to be, new.
So it's giving them a second life, basically.
Yeah, and it extends their lifespan, reduces the need for new materials.
Makes sense. But is it actually cheaper than just buying new bearings?
Often it is, especially for high-precision bearings. Plus, it cuts down on downtime for the customer.
Oh, I see, because they don't have to wait for new ones to be made and shipped.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
Okay, so FAG R&R, that's a good one for the presentation. What about Schaeffler OP Time? I think you mentioned that earlier.
Right. OP Time, it's all about predictive maintenance. They use sensors to monitor the condition of bearings and other components.
In real time.
Yep. The sensors track things like vibration, temperature, lubrication levels. All that data gets sent to a software platform.
So it's like a constant health check for their equipment.
Exactly. And that helps customers avoid those unexpected breakdowns and costly downtime.
And by predicting failures, they can replace parts only when needed, not just on a fixed schedule.
Right, which saves resources in the long run, less waste.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes. Okay, what was that third customer offering you wanted to highlight?
Oh, yes. The Schaeffler Concept. It's their system for refillable lubrication cartridges.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that. Less waste.
Exactly. Instead of constantly buying new cartridges and tossing the old ones, they just refill the existing ones.
Smart. It seems simple, but I bet it cuts down on a lot of plastic waste.
It does, and customers are really liking it.
I can see why. It's easy, good for the environment, and probably saves them money too.
Right, it aligns with their sustainability goals.
Okay, I'm noticing a theme here with FAG R&R, OpTime, and Concept. They all seem to be pushing for a circular economy.
Definitely. Reducing waste, making things last longer, using fewer new materials. It's a really holistic approach.
We've talked a lot about Tinex's operational stuff and their customer offerings, but what about their employees? You mentioned some things earlier, like fruit baskets and even spa vacations.
Oh, yeah. They do a lot to create a good work environment.
What else do they do besides those?
Well, they offer a range of benefits. They give tickets to different events and activities like swimming pools, theaters, even sporting events.
Wow. Sounds like they really care about their employees' well-being.
They do. They want them to have a good work-life balance.
Some people might say, oh, that's just fluff, though. Distraction from their core business.
I don't think so. I think Tinex sees it as an investment. When employees feel good, they're more engaged and productive. And that, in turn, makes the whole business more efficient and, well, sustainable.
It all connects.
Exactly. Plus, it helps them attract and keep good people.
Right, because people want to work for companies that share their values. Now, you also mentioned something about Christmas gifts for employees' children, right?
Yeah, they do that too. It's a nice touch. It shows they care about families too.
It's those little things that make a difference. So we've covered their operations, their customer focus, and how they treat their employees. It's clear they're really trying to walk the walk on sustainability.
Yeah.
But do they have, any specific targets they're aiming for?
Oh, they do. Ambitious ones. They've committed to things like reducing CO2 emissions in line with the Paris Agreement, achieving zero waste to landfill, getting 100% of their energy from renewable sources, all by certain target dates.
Those are some big goals. How are they going about actually achieving those?
They have a whole bunch of initiatives. They're installing a solar power plant, for one thing, on their roof.
Oh, wow.
They're switching to electric vehicles for their fleet and putting in charging stations.
That's great. What else?
Let's see. They're setting up a system to collect rainwater, replacing all their old lights with LED ones.
Smart. Less energy use.
Exactly. They're even building a special shed to encourage employees to bike to work.
Oh, nice. What about waste? Any initiatives there?
Yeah, they're finding creative ways to reuse things, like using old boxes as packaging filler, instead of just throwing them out.
That's a great idea. So they're really taking concrete steps, not just talking about it. It's impressive. Now let's talk about your presentation. You'll be presenting all this to Tinex's employees, suppliers, and customers. What are the key takeaways for each group?
Good question. For employees, I want them to see how their work contributes to the bigger picture, to feel proud to work for a company that's trying to make a difference.
Make them feel part of something meaningful.
Exactly. For suppliers, I want to stress the importance of their code of conduct. Make it clear that sustainability isn't optional, it's essential if they want to work with Tinex.
Setting the bar high.
Yeah. And then for customers, I want to highlight how Tinex can help them meet their own sustainability goals. Show them they're not just a supplier, but a partner.
Working together towards a common goal.
Exactly. I want everyone, employees, suppliers, customers, to see how committed Tinex is to making a real positive impact.
I think you're off to a fantastic start. You have a great story to tell.
Thank you.
Now, before we finish up part 2 of this deep dive, I have one last question for our listeners to think about. We talked about how being part of the Assel-Johnson Group might affect Tinex's sustainability efforts. But what about the other way around? Could Tinex's work inspire other companies within that larger group? It's something to consider. We'll be back with part 3 soon. So we've seen how Tinex is embedding sustainability in everything they do, from their supply chain to how they treat their employees. It's pretty impressive. And you've got some great material for your presentation. But let's zoom out a bit. How do you think this focus on sustainability could affect their success in the long run?
That's a really important question. I think it could be a major advantage for them. For starters, customers are increasingly looking for sustainable products and services. It's not a niche thing anymore.
Right, it's becoming the norm. So Tinex is in a good position.
Exactly. They could attract new customers who care about these issues and build stronger relationships with existing ones.
It gives them an edge.
Yeah. Especially as more and more companies start including sustainability in their buying decisions.
Like a stamp of approval. And it's not just customers, right? Investors are paying attention too.
Oh, definitely. Investors are more likely to support companies that are seen as responsible and sustainable. It reduces their risk and shows a commitment to long-term value.
So sustainability is good for business, not just the planet.
Exactly. And we can't forget about employees. We've already talked about Tinex's efforts to create a positive work environment. But do you think that could actually contribute to their sustainability goals?
That's interesting. How so?
Well, when employees are happy and engaged, they're more likely to be productive and efficient. That translates to less waste and a more sustainable operation overall.
It's all connected.
Right. Plus, it helps them attract and keep talented people. People want to work for companies that share their values.
It creates a sort of positive feedback loop. Sustainability attracts talent. Talent drives innovation and efficiency, which further boosts sustainability.
That's a great way to put it. It's about building a business that's successful over the long term for everyone involved: the company, the employees, the customers, and the environment.
It's inspiring to see a company like Tinex showing that success and sustainability can go hand in hand. They're setting a great example.
I agree. It's a good reminder that it's possible.
Definitely. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. From their vision and values to their specific initiatives, Tinex is definitely walking the walk when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah, I think our listener has a lot of great information to work with for their presentation.
Absolutely. They should feel confident and inspired to share Tinex's story. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Tinex's sustainability journey. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Until next time.